Hello YouTube, welcome to your 11th C++ tutorial. In this tutorial I will be talking about switch statements. Switch statements basically are like if statements, except it doesn't cover a range. So if you recall the if statement, you could say if, I think we had Susie age is greater than 60. So basically this includes 61, 62, 63, 64, 586, 1924. It includes a big range. It includes everything that's greater than 60. It's not defined only to one number. So basically what switch statements do is they let you specify, okay? So hang on to that for a minute and let me declare a new variable called number, okay? And we're going to set it equal to 0 for now, okay? So the syntax for a switch statement is switch, and then in parentheses you want to say number. Okay, what are you going to evaluate? Well, you're evaluating the variable number, okay? So now we want to open and close our curly braces, and with switch statements, each specific thing you're gonna be searching for, they're called cases, okay? So we're gonna call it case, and now let's say we want case, 0, and you put the colon like this, and below this you'll write in, let's just say cout, let's say you entered 0, okay, and L, okay? Now, for now, just write in this break. This is very crucial, and I'll be going over this later. But basically, I'm gonna copy and paste this a couple times, and let's just keep it simple. Let's just, you know what? Let's do 0, 10, and 20. You entered zeros. You entered 10s, and you entered 20s. Oops, spelled it wrong. Okay, so basically what this is going to do is it's going to go through and it's going to say, it's going to evaluate number, okay? So whatever number is equal to, it's going to evaluate. So case 0, case just means when it is equal to 0, it's going to do this stuff, okay? What the break statement does is, well, basically, let me back up a little bit. The switch statement, basically, it just looks for an entry point and then it continues on out or on with the code. Like I told you with the if statements, it'll look at something and it'll execute it and it'll evaluate every single other time. So if you have if she is greater than her age is greater than 60, if her age is greater than 40 and it's less than or equal to 60, if it evaluates every single time. Well, basically with a switch statement, what C++ does is it searches these cases, and when it finds a case, so in this case it's 0, it says, oh, I found 0. So without this break statement, it's going to run through everything. Okay, and for right now, let me just write default, and we're going to have nothing. Well, okay. I'll explain that in just a minute. So let me go ahead and take out these break statements really quick. And I just want to show you that since 0 is the first case, its entry point is going to be at 0, and then it's going to run everything else. Okay? So let me go ahead and compile and run this. Oops, I'm missing my end quote. Oops. Okay, let me go ahead and try this again. Okay, you see how it says you entered 0s, 10s, 20s, and then default is triggered. Okay, what the heck? I entered a 0, it's a zeros, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever. 10s are kind of like the teens, and 20s are obviously the 20s. Okay, well, 0 is not a 10s, 0 is not a 20s, and why did this default trigger? So we want to add in that break. And basically what the break does is it gives it a place to end. Otherwise, if you don't end this break statement, well, in order for it to end, it has to run through everything. Okay, so let me go ahead and add a break statement in here. And now let me go ahead and compile and run it one more time. And you have to close your window in order to compile and run again. So you can see right here now it just says you entered zeros. So now let's enter in 10, okay? So I want to build and run this. Okay, you entered 10s, okay? So now let's enter 20 and it'll go down and it'll find case 20 for its entry point. It'll output you entered 20 on the screen, and then it'll break, which basically says, you know what? Let me end this whole statement. Let me just skip over the rest of it and go on to the next part of the code. Okay? So now let's build and run this with 20 in, and you entered 20s. Okay, simple enough. Let's say we entered in 30. Okay? Well, we don't have a case 30. And remember, it has to be specific. Exactly what you want it to have entered is what you need here. Okay, well, let's have 30. Well, if you notice, it says default triggered. Okay? Why don't we need to put a break statement on the default? Well, the default is the very last thing in the switch statement, so having a break statement would be kind of redundant. It would kind of be like saying, I don't know, I can't think of a good example right now. Basically, you don't need to specify at the very end of the code, hey, this is the end of the code, or the end of this switch statement. Now, don't get confused with return 0. Return 0 tells your main program, hey, I'm all set. The program is completely finished. That's separate from this. But since we're only dealing with this switch statement right here, you don't need a break statement because it's the very last command or the very last statement inside the statement. That's why it's tabbed over, because it's statement inside a statement, you know. So the default triggered, well, since 30 isn't 0, 30 isn't 10, and 30 isn't 20, well, default is the last resort. That's kind of like in the if-else statements. We just had else, and that's the last resort. It's kind of like the default value. So say you want to add in for 30. Well, we add in case 30, and I'm just going to keep this simple, and I'm going to write, wow, I cannot spell today. We're going to enter in 30, and we're going to end this line. Okay, so let me go ahead. Oh, I guess I can't hit F9 because it pauses my recording. All right, let me click build and run out to change that hotkey. So when we build and run this, 30, and you know what? Look at it, it says default triggered because what did I forget? I forgot my break statement. So it continued on to the rest of the code. Once again, this break statement is needed to say, hey, I'm all done with this switch statement, get me out of it. So let me compile and run this now that I added in that break. And 30. Okay, and that's it for this tutorial. Check out my next tutorial and I'll show you how you can enter in more cases and simplify it down a little bit. Until then, thanks for watching.